Welcome back. As you can see, it's another SCX24 Gladiator build. And you can see I've got a body there, but we're not going to get to that just yet. This is going to focus on chassis, getting that going. So this is going to be a little different than my prior Gladiator build. I'm going to go very low CG on this one. So I've got Mofo RC's carbon fiber frame rails. I'm going to use the same Torque Beast motor. I've got this nice Ecopower 13-gram servo that's rated pretty high at 6 volts, 64 ounce-inches. So without running higher BEC or Fury Tech, I think that's going to be a great servo for this. So it'll run on the V2 electronics. I'll put that servo on Mofo's brass servo tray. I've got some brass Injora links. Then I've got brass axles front and rear, brass high clearance links, some brass knuckles for the front, and then these sweet Powerhobby internal shocks. They're bronze, which I thought would go well with the paint scheme and the wheels that I've got here. These are WTmicro bronze wheels. I forget the name of the style, but I've shown this before. And then I've got the new Treal Gladiator bumper here. I've got their Injora, it's got the new sliders for the Gladiator as well. And then Flubberstufferz has some inner fenders. I'm going to try to modify those to work with this LCG frame. And last thing is the tires. I think I'm going to start with these TSL Super Swamper Narrows, these RC 4-wheel drives. They feel really nice. So that's kind of a quick overview of stage one here, at least on the chassis side. So we're going to jump in and see if we can't get this thing rolling. All right, I figured the first thing I'd jump into is the axles, but I wanted to check all the fitment here before I get too far. And as suspected, there's a little fitment issue with the black coating between the Mofo black brass tray and the Mofo black brass axles. So one side's fitting down fine, but one side's not. So I'm gonna have to, done this before, Dremel a little of the black coating off on the inside edge there to get this to sit down. And I've had issues with knuckles before, but these seem to fit on here, these NHX. They look like they're gonna rotate without binding. So it looks like only the servo tray is gonna need a little slight clearance modification. And you can see I've got the frame rails out, and these look pretty sweet. So I'm gonna get that modified and then get the truck torn down and start swapping all the inners into the brass axles and get these assemblies done, and then we'll see where we are at that point. Well, it's getting into this, and you can see I'm missing my worm gears, and I remembered as I was doing this, I picked up some Injora 13 tooth overdrive. So I believe these are in the low 20s, like 23%. So this should be a little more overdrive than I put in my other Gladiator with that hot racing transmission. I want to say that one was like 15, somewhere around there. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull this out and get that popped in there, and that should be the whole front axle assembled. Quick update here. One thing I noticed, which I've never encountered before on a stock vehicle, was looked like both of the dog bones, the pins were off center. But I went ahead and installed it just to double check it, but I want to show you what that does. You can see the pin there. This is the one that's too long. So it actually comes out of the slot, and you can see it actually bucking this knuckle. So that's what a lot of people experience when either the slot is not deep enough or the pin is off center or too long. You'll get this kind of kicking at full lock. And of course it's super exaggerated when you're actually at speed at full lock. So I'm going to pull these dog bones and Dremel the long side down just a micron or two to even it out with the other pin, and that should solve the problem on both sides. But again, good idea to do all this off the truck by hand to rotate everything and check it. So other than that, the front axle is looking good. So we should be complete here shortly. Another quick update here on the steering. So that did help evening out the long pin, but I still have a little bit of bucking I can feel, and I think now what it's happening from looking at it, you know, because these are aftermarket axles, they don't have the cup like the stock axle does on the front that acts as a stop. So these axles would actually be great candidates for the new CVD joints. Mofo RC has some, and RC all-wheel drive has some as well. But I think I don't want to take any more off the pin just because I'm a little wary to make that too short. The other option, I could deepen the drive slot in that cup in this outer axle with the Dremel wheel. But I think I'm going to hook it up and get all the steering set up and just see if it's problematic, and then I can go from there. And then potentially in a future stage, maybe upgrade to CVDs to actually get more throw than this, potentially. So anyways, that's the update. I'm looking at the rear axle, got this ready to go. I forgot to mention earlier, these are the V1 brass axles from Mofo, which basically the difference is they have vertical bearing retainers instead of horizontal like stock. So the big difference is if you're running Mofo's Portal kit, you cannot run them on these V1 axles, but he does have V2 axles that have fixed it and made them horizontal. And they also, the V2 have a thicker, heavier brass diff cover than these V1s. But since portals aren't going on this, it's not an issue. So I'm gonna get this rear axle together, and I think it's gonna be links and transmission, motor, and frame start to get this chassis actually together. The satisfying sound of motor break-in. So that's one thing that's nice on the V2. You've got throttle trim, so you can just turn that up a little bit, get this guy going, and let it break in at kind of a low RPM. So we are going here, axles are together, so we're gonna get this motor in, meshed up, transmission together, and then we'll look at these links. Okay, let's see if I've got this meshed up all right. Got a little spur wiggle there. Let's turn it on and test it. Let's see. Sounds good, feels good, looks good. Check. Okay, I was getting ready to embark on assembly. I figured I'd show you everything that comes with these carbon fiber rails. So it does come with hardware and 3 aluminum crossbars, assortment of micro nuts. And you can see I've already pulled some of the hardware. You're going to want to use this hardware because it's all longer than stock. So here you can see that's a stock screw that holds the transmission skid in. There's 2 on each side, and then that's the link screw typically that goes through the frame, same link that goes through the trans skid for the lowers. So you can see there you get longer ones, and that accounts for the dimension of this carbon fiber. So there's no insets, it's just flat, so it is thicker. This is actually a little C-channel, so your trans skid sits in there, and it's just a very thin piece of metal. So just one thing to note, don't try to reuse screws, you're going to come up short, literally. Some progress on the frame. You can see I've got it kind of mocked in there to an extent, and I was mocking up these front fenders and they fit pretty well. Of course I'll have to cut some of those away to expose some more shock mount positions. But you can see there, it's not fully closing. And you can see why right here because of those extended shock towers. So I'm going to clip both of those little corners basically out. They're kind of covered anyways by the bed. And it looks like they're going to interfere with any kind of rear fender as well. So that's one little mod I think I'm going to have to do first to even think about getting those fenders to work. And then I think the rear is going to take quite a bit of cutting and maybe a few new holes poked to work with this chassis. But the other piece of discovery was the ESC tray on the front, and of course it's one width all along here in between those frame rails, and you can see that large hole. That's for the body post mount screw. So that's for this big screw here on the side. I'll focus here. So that screw actually sits above the frame on an OEM application, and it sticks out further than the frame. And we are now asking it to be between the frame, even with both of those mounts at the back. And you can see a little bit of width comes out past that. So I think I'm gonna have to take a Dremel, take that out so that frame isn't bowed, but shouldn't be a super big deal. All right, got the CSC tray dremeled and modified, and you can see it's fitting in here nicely. So when it's in here, you can see basically touching at the rails and all the mount points now. Let's show you a little closer look at what I did. Not much. You can see I just thinned it out right there with a sanding wheel on each side. So basically everything was flush with these mount posts. So then just this little peg goes through the holes. So that's all working well. I pulled out the interior just to make sure this closed, and it does, but I didn't want to cut that interior since I'm not going to use this body. So I'm just going to leave the interior out for now, and I'll modify a new interior at a later date. So the next thing is get the front fenders in with these, and it looks like they're going to be a little wide, and that's probably due to the extra width of the rails. So they may need a little trimming on the edge, but we get them in there, test fit them, and then we start cutting away at them. All right, back with a little update here. Made some good progress. Got these Flubberstufferz inner fenders trimmed up and modified, and they're nice and flexible and soft, easy to trim with, I just used Lexan scissors and X-Acto blade, but was able to basically open them up and get all access, full access to all the holes there for my shock mount options, and then I clearanced out a little for that ESC tray. But those are going to work really well, I think. The rear ones, that's all I had to do was trim for the shocks. The front ones I had to take some width out of the sides to get them to lay in and get this body to close down and sit in here flush. So you can see they kind of sit a little below that fender edge. They tuck right in nicely. So that's what's really nice. They're flexible, so they're not going to bind up anything, and you can trim them really easily. So very happy with these. Another great Flubberstufferz product. So the next thing, we're going to get everything bolted up and move towards wheels and tires. So I've got the Powerhobby internal shocks out, these bronze. They came with silver springs installed, which I believe are firmer than the black. So I've swapped black in, so I'm going to put these in the front. And then I've got the RCAddictions 19 custom high clearance brass links for the Gladiator. So these I used aluminum on my other Gladiator, so I know I like these. These are really nice. I've used brass ones in the past on a C10 build. And of course I got my axles all ready to go and my Ecopower 640T servo. And this will be running at 6 volts off the stock electronics. So So that is 64 ounce inches at 6 volts. So that should be more than sufficient. I want to say this is about a $25 servo. So not super cheap, but not super expensive either. Good option if you're not running a super high BEC. But that's the long and short of it. So I'm gonna get this stuff installed and we'll take a look. Here we are with a little link progress, axle progress. So one thing I noticed on these is they came with O-rings on both sides. My two other sets didn't have any O-rings and I don't remember removing them. So I don't know what the deal is, but with two O-rings, they're way too stiff. They don't move and twist. So I ended up taking an O-ring off one side of each of them and they're nice and loose. So they're gonna work well. The rear axle is all buttoned up. Got scale hubs on there. Looking at the front axle, I just wanted to go over this before I install it. The servo has got pretty large hole slots on the sides, so you're gonna need some kind of washer. The smallest I had was still too large, so I needed a little black plastic Mofo spacer there additionally. So I've got it on the very back setting. You can see how far it comes past the forelink. Hopefully that doesn't stick too far back. But it works out well on the front. It's super tight. I pointed out in my last video, this little slot here allows this to be able to sit a little lower. So it actually sits exactly perfect. I don't think I can connect it one-handed, but it sits in there perfect. I'll show a picture of it here in a second when I get it hooked up. But axle's going smooth, so I'm gonna get that popped in and we should have a truck. Well, a quick discovery here, had to remove the washers. They were too wide for this servo to fit in between the frame rails here, as you can see. So I pulled them and I just have the black plastic spacer in there, which I'd much rather have a piece of metal. So I may hunt around for a metal washer that's a little bit smaller and narrower here to the side. The next issue, it looks like this plug and or the back of the servo, since it's so deep and pushed back, may end up colliding with this ESC tray edge here, especially the cord, the plug coming at the end over here, because this whole tray is dropped, I believe, with this chassis. So I'm gonna get everything mounted in there, put the shocks on and just see, but I think that may be negatively affecting full compression down the middle, but we will see. Servo's in. I did have to clearance the ESC tray for the cord on the back of the servo. But it did sit forward enough to clear the actual tray. And now I've got compression all the way up to where my cables will be coming out of the ESC tray. Basically, I hit the little stops on each side. So I'm not getting full compression out of those shocks. I've still got more, but I really can't get any higher without hitting cables. So I may end up moving those shocks. I'm just gonna leave them for now and get everything back in. And you can see I ended up trimming a little more out than I did initially. And just open that up a little more, but that's just perfect for that little piece coming out there. So that all worked out really well. I just wish I could get full articulation out of these shocks, so they may go to a different position so I can get full usage. I'll just see once I get the body on, do a little flex test and go from there. All right, got it all plugged in, got the steering adjusted, made the first little suspension discovery. So I think I am going to relocate these shocks to a more vertical position. You can hear the lugs of the tires are getting into them. So I'm really not feeling any vibration at the knuckles. So I think I can get more steering if I adjust those shocks out of the way, and I should be able to get potentially all the usage out of the shock as well. Right now I'm not getting to full compression, but other than that, servo clearance at the front's great. Got room for LED wires coming out of the ESC, so no issues there. So I'll tweak those, and then we've got the bumper and the sliders to get on. All right, well, relocated the shock, got it out of the way, got the same ride height, but I'm still not able to get full compression because I hit basically the plugs and the stop with the servo. So I may readjust those, I'm not sure, but I was looking at the steering. Now that I don't have the shocks in the way, I was getting that adjusted. And check out this throw. So I was running it, and I am getting some little dog bone bucking. But wow, so I think I am going to get in touch with Mofo RC and get some CVDs for the front of this to take full advantage. And I don't even have the dual rate all the way up, so that is almost touching links right there. So that is really good throw, and it seems to not be too bad, but it puts a little bind on the motor. You can kind of hear the motor. Not too bad in that direction, fairly smooth. A lot worse in this direction. So I may pull the dog bones as well and the cups and see if I can smooth those out, but I think for now we're going to move on. Quick look at these Injora sliders. That went on easy. So these are like most metal sliders, two pieces. They've got kind of the frame tray and then the slider. So you've got the slots to kind of adjust it in and out and forward and backwards, which is nice, and hardware. It has these little plastic spacers that I assume you only need if you want to space it up or down for a lifted body or a slammed body. But the way I've got these, I've got the bracket upwards, and then I've got the slider on top of that. And I did have to trim off a little more of this inner fender, which is this little chunk right there. You can see the other side is quite a bit longer. So again, super easy to do, but those look good. I've got them flared at the back to kind of follow the body line. But they sit nicely in that little groove that runs along there. So nice product from Injora. Pretty impressed with these sliders. I think those look really good. Be nice to have some metal on there. So I'm gonna get the other one on and then we'll hit the bumper. Okay, here we are. Bumper is on. Looks really good. I really like that they machined out the fair lead, so it's silver and not black. It's got nice shackles on there. I popped the LEDs in. So this has 3 adjustment holes, and I've got it on the furthest one inward. So that's really nice. Good tire clearance. Let me see it from the bottom here. So let me pop this open, take a quick last look inside. So you can see these sliders from the inside view here. So I think that is on its way to being a very clean build. I really love the bronze. Bronze on bronze. If only the brass matched the bronze, it would be incredible. So that's how it sits for stage 1. We'll dub this the chassis stage, and I've got a lot of really cool stuff planned coming up. Some scale details, some lighting, and of course custom painted body. So between now and then I'm going to work on suspension and getting my clearances down, because I'm going to have to trim up that body. You can see here I'm getting into it, but maybe some flex blades, I don't know. So stay tuned. Stage 2 will be coming up at some point. Thanks for watching.